let me apologize in advance for not speaking Spanish. It's really a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be on this side of the wall, if you will, the wall that I don't think is ever going to be built. But it's really wonderful to be in Mexico. This is my second time at this Ciudad de los Ideas, which I think is really a wonderful expression of everything that is not going on in the United States right now in terms of showing our global shared common values and interests. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and I'll be glad to take whatever questions you have. I am the editorial page editor for the San Francisco Chronicle, the largest newspaper in Northern California. I've been in this position for 20 years. Before that, I had a number of positions, all on the news side as both a reporter and a signing editor. But I have to say, working on the opinion pages is the best job in the newspaper. I get to have opinions and write my opinions. And certainly, U.S.-Mexico relations loomed extremely large in this last campaign. From the day one when Donald Trump announced his candidacy, he talked about building a wall, and talked about the quote-unquote threat from immigration. But I have to tell you, in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I think in California generally, there's really an appreciation for the value of immigration and what it's meant, not only for our economy and the Mexico economy, but also the cultural richness that we get by having the relationship that we have with Mexico. I will say this, no matter what happens in Washington, I don't think that relationship is going to be weakened in California. Our newly elected U.S. Senator Kamala Harris talked to a group of immigrants in Los Angeles recently and said, "We've got your back." And I think we're going to see that kind of resistance if Trump really tries to inflict some of the policies that he talked about during the campaign. It's one thing to campaign; it's another to take the reins of the presidency. Just one quick thought I have, and then I'll take your questions. Because one of the things that I've heard asked of me here in Mexico is, do you think Donald Trump is going to be governing differently than he campaigned? And I think the first sign that we can really have of which direction he's going is the appointments that he's made. And I have to say, I'm not optimistic. The signs are not good. If you look at some of the people that he's appointed, I would use a phrase that he used during one of his debates with Hillary Clinton. I think he's hanging out with some bad hombres. His appointment for Attorney General, which is the #1 law officer in the United States, Jeff Sessions, somebody who's been vehemently opposed to immigration reform. That's not a good sign. His appointment for his chief White House strategist, Stephen Bannon, is somebody who's made a lot of, been associated with a website that has a lot of bigoted commentary. In the near term, I'm not optimistic because I think Donald Trump's first inclination is to validate the wishes of the people who elected him. But let me have an optimistic note. I don't think it's going to last. I think if he continues with the sort of divisive rhetoric, the sort of alienating policies, not only with Mexico but the rest of the world, I think he's going to get a lot of resistance in the United States. With that, I'll be glad to take any questions you have. Well, I think certainly my job in the media is to help educate people help educate our audience, which is predominantly Americans, obviously, on what is really going on. And first of all, as much as Donald Trump postured about migration and this flood of immigrants that we have, I mean, the reality is immigration from Mexico to the United States has been at net zero for a number of years. So I think that's one of the important things to get across. I think the other thing that maybe is not widely understood in the U.S., although as a journalist I'm doing my utmost to make sure people are aware of it, is the remarkable growth and evolution of the economy here. That the U.S. and Mexico are really interdependent on each other, and in ways far more nuanced and expansive than, as you point out, the perception. The interesting thing is, if you look at where Donald Trump was strongest, it tended to be where immigrants were fewest. In California, he received somewhere south of 30% of the vote. And those are people who, California obviously has a great deal of immigration, and I think people are aware of it. But if you look at so many of those states where people see immigrants as somehow a threat, and I think the interesting thing is, I was just talking to Jose Antonio Meade, and he was pointing out that right now there are winners and losers in NAFTA on both sides of the border, and so I think, as I said in the presentation, I think the American business community is going to rebel, and they have a lot of influence on Capitol Hill if Trump really tries to push a lot of these anti-free trade policies, protectionist policies. Good question. Well, I would say this. That would be a question I would actually, ask all of you. You know a lot more than I do, but I do think there is a recognition that that your president has done a lot in terms of, at least early on in his administration, of implementing some reforms. I think that the perception of Mexico generally, in terms of the government, in terms of your systems, still challenged in many ways, but improving would be my perception. I would say this about COEX, that it is 100% soothing to Californians who are really frustrated with the election outcome and how it went against so many values that we hold dear. I think it has zero chance of succeeding. I don't think there's any real serious effort in California to secede from the United States. If we were to try it, I don't even think it's going to get that far. Ultimately, we would have to have a constitutional amendment which would start with the Republican Congress. And even though they may not like the way we vote, I think they value our economy, which if it were a nation would be somewhere around plus or minus 6 in the world. So I think it's a good way of venting. I see the hashtag CalExit a lot on my Twitter, but I don't think it's going to happen. And I don't think it will even get past step 1. I am very surprised by the results. I think the media, I don't think we so much missed the Trump phenomenon is because we certainly reported on it in every aspect, not only the outrageous things he was saying, the lies and distortions that he was spreading, but the fact that a lot of people were responding to it, the media certainly reported that. Here's my overall sense of the media's response to Trump in the United States, is he benefited greatly by being so crazy early on. In my office, I always have CNN on in the background while I'm working. That way, if there's a major story somewhere in the country, I'm aware of it. And I have to tell you, early on, even in the Republican primary, they would cut away from regular programming to show his speeches unedited, uninterrupted, in full, because they knew he was probably going to say something stupid, and that would give them, the commentators, something to talk about. So that definitely lifted him. He had far more coverage than any of the Republican candidates. I mean, by exponentially more. In fact, in the primary season, he had more media coverage than Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, the two Democrats combined. And ultimately, if you look at U.S. newspaper endorsements, Donald Trump, this is the first time this has happened in modern history, where not a single major American newspaper endorsed Donald Trump. Some like the Arizona Republic, which had endorsed Republicans throughout their history, endorsed Hillary Clinton. There were some papers, like in Detroit, where they endorsed Gary Johnson, the libertarian. Some newspapers Republican newspapers didn't endorse anybody at all. The largest newspaper to endorse Donald Trump was the Las Vegas Review-Journal, which is owned by Sheldon Adelson, who is a big Republican contributor. I mean, normally when you would look at that, you would say, wow, this guy has no chance. But there's a lot of introspection in the media about how we covered the election. But I have to say this, I think the result was a rejection not only of Hillary Clinton, but maybe even more so, it was a rejection of a lot of American institutions, including the media, frankly. You know, we lost a lot of ground in terms of credibility when you have a major candidate who's going out day in and day out. He's mocking the press pool, saying they're liars, they're horrible people. I mean, those were the kinds of words he was using. They're disgusting, they're scum. Those are Donald Trump's real words. And for his supporters, they embraced that because they didn't want to believe what we were writing, and I think it worked to his advantage. And so we in the mainstream media in the United States, we have some work to do to repair our standing, and especially when you have all these fake news sites that were getting a lot of hits. It's really it's a challenging time for American media. Well, I think if he does try to implement a lot of the policies he has, he's going to get pushed back. And you know, we have a number of things coming up that are really going to give us a sense of how serious he is. I mean, I talked about his appointments, but one of the things that I think we're going to have to look at is President Obama did a lot by executive order on policies that are diametrically opposed by the Trump campaign. Things like the Dreamers, you know, the young people who have grown up in America, they came at a very young age and now have a chance to go to college. Will Trump go after that? That'll be, you know, a telling thing. Certainly on climate, the President Obama did a lot by executive orders that Donald Trump, if he's so inclined, can rip up on day one. I mean, I worry about the U.S. economy, particularly in California. Global trade with Mexico is so important to us. And as much as anything, I worry about the way not only Americans treat the rest of the world, and the rest of the world regards us, which I think we made some advances during Obama, but also the way we interact with each other as Americans. I think this is really, there were divisions before this election. They've been torn wide open during this election. It's going to be a precarious time for the United States. I'm actually not worried about Mitt Romney being in Trump's cabinet because I think in many ways he would be a stabilizing influence, both in policy and in tone. I think the big question is whether Mitt Romney will want to be in Donald Trump's cabinet, considering all the things that he said about him, you know, during the campaign. Are you referring to the visit that Trump had in Mexico during the campaign? I have to say, I think that was a miscalculation by President Pena to have that meeting with a candidate who was so openly hostile toward Mexico, and also who was so fast and loose with the truth. Don't you think, no matter what was said in that meeting, that Donald Trump was going to come out and say whatever he thought would help him politically? I think probably doing that meeting was a mistake, and it allowed Donald Trump to get some post-meeting spin that was undeserved, and from what I understand, it did not play well with the voters down here. I think there will be new opportunities to rebuild the relationships once Donald Trump goes into office. I don't know that that will happen right away, but as I said in the session there, I've been a little bit struck since the election at Donald Trump's facial expressions. Not only on election night, I would say his face had a look of humility, which is something I never saw during the campaign. And then when he met with President Obama in the Oval Office that Thursday, I would say Donald Trump came across as respectful, which is a word I would never use with him during the campaign. So I think there is some hope that U.S.-Mexico relations can move forward. But I think Donald Trump has some repairing to do, because I mean, the idea that you could somehow get a sovereign nation to do something that they don't want to do, that is really disrespectful to its people, is just insane. And also, there's a real question about how effective a law would be. I think that's one of those campaign pledges that 4 years from now we're going to look back, and it'll be kind of like President Obama saying he was going to close Guantanamo Bay. Much easier said than done. I think Donald Trump will have some good excuses for not having that wall built, but I don't see that wall going up anytime soon. Certainly not in the next 4 years. Well, I think the first thing he's going to have to do, which he has not necessarily done yet, is build some relations with Capitol Hill and really have an alliance that will do what he wants to do. And I think that's going to take time, because the thing is, Donald Trump does not go into the White House with a huge mandate. He goes in with a significant supply of fervent supporters, but he really doesn't have a mandate from the American people. More people voted for Hillary Clinton than voted for Donald Trump. We just happen to have this crazy system called Electoral College in the United States, which I actually write about in my Sunday column that should be online now, that amplifies the influence of a few states. Here we have a country of more than 300 million people, and our election is basically decided by 6 to 8 battleground states. So Donald Trump, he's not going to go in with a lot of Republicans fearful of him, because a lot of them did not necessarily run for him. They don't necessarily owe their election to him, unlike, say, when Ronald Reagan ran in 1980, and there are a lot of Republicans who would not have won were it not for Ronald Reagan. Donald Trump doesn't have that same kind of coattails and mandate. So I think his first step is he's going to have to build his support base bigger than it is now if he wants to get any of these policies done. And he's also going to have to do something that we didn't see any sign of during the campaign. He's going to have to compromise. I mean, that is the reality. There is no way all these promises that you heard during the campaign are going to go into effect without him compromising. Muslims, yes. I think even if he wants to do that, he's going to run into constitutional problems. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution not only guarantees freedom of the press, thankfully, so I hate to think of it then, but this guy is president, but also guarantees freedom of religion. And I think to separate people on the basis of their religious belief, or even to ask people what their religious belief is when they apply for a passport to the United States, apply for a visa, is basically un-American. And I think no matter how determined he is to do that, it's not going to happen, because I think it will be challenged constitutionally, and I think it will be thrown out constitutionally. And I think there is no shortage of groups in the United States that would take him on with that. Having said that, there may be further screening than what we've seen, but it won't be a matter of, you, Mark, that you're a Muslim and you can't get into the United States. I just do not see that happening, even if he wants to. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your questions and your interest, and I hope I helped in some way with your coverage. Thank you.
Thank you.